Welcome, dear listener. You found your way here to a quiet space where the flickering candlelight of centuries past gently illuminates the pages of time. As you settle into your cozy bed, take a deep breath and let go of the weight of your day. Here, in this quiet place, we travel slowly, softly, into the past. No rush, no urgency, just the gentle rhythm of a tale unfolding, like a leaf drifting on a calm river. Tonight, let's explore a calm and curious question. What did people read in the 1500s? Not kings or popes, but everyday people. The village merchant, the student in a small university town, the nun behind cloistered walls, or the printer's apprentice, ink-stained and wide-eyed at the press. We'll wander through the hushed libraries, candlelit bedrooms, and shaded gardens where books were opened and minds quietly wandered. So breathe slowly and let's begin. In the early 1500s, Europe was still rubbing the sleep out of its eyes after a long medieval night. The printing press, only a few decades old, had begun its slow and steady revolution, one quiet page at a time. Before the press, books were rare, hand-copied, labors of love and patience. Scribes hunched over desks in monasteries, their quills scratching across vellum. A single book could take months, even years to produce. And so, books were expensive. Treasures, really. Mostly owned by churches, nobles, or universities. But by the 1500s, things were changing, slowly, softly. The printing press, introduced in the mid-1400s by Gutenberg, had begun to shift the rhythm of reading. Now, pages could be printed in batches, and books began to appear in more modest homes. Not everywhere, not suddenly, but enough to notice. In towns and cities, small bookshops opened. Printers inked their type and pressed pages into being. The smell of fresh ink and crisp paper became familiar in certain alleys and squares. And for those who could read, and increasingly that number was growing, there were things to read. So, what did people read in the 1500s? Let's begin quite gently with the religious texts. For many, the Bible was the first and sometimes only book they would own, but not always in Latin anymore. Thanks to reformers and translators like Martin Luther, the Bible began to appear in the vernacular, in German, English, Dutch, and other local languages. And this mattered, because when people could read the sacred words in their own tongue, they read not just with reverence, but with recognition. Stories became more personal, parables felt closer, but beyond the Bible, there were almanacs, small handy books filled with weather predictions, planting advice, phases of the moon, and saints' days. Often illustrated, they were kept in kitchens, carried to market, or consulted before sowing seeds. They were not books to read in one sitting, but to return to again and again, like an old friend. Then there were books of manners, gentle advice for how to behave at the table, how to speak with grace, how to walk or even sneeze politely. These were popular in towns where the rising merchant class wanted to learn the language of courts and guild halls. Young students, mostly boys, but sometimes clever and determined girls, read grammar books, classical texts, and translations of ancient authors. Latin was still the key to learning, and so schoolbooks taught it patiently, sometimes with amusing rhymes or memorable illustrations. In the universities, scholars read the works of Aristotle, Cicero, and Pliny, as well as new writings from humanists like Erasmus. These books weren't meant for entertainment, But even serious books can bring a kind of quiet joy. Women in convents often had their own small libraries, books of hours, beautiful illustrated prayer books, were read slowly, meditatively, during quiet hours. Some nuns copied texts, while others composed their own reflections, sometimes poetry, and then there were stories. Oh yes, even then people loved a good tale. Chivalric romances, tales of knights, quests, and distant lands were still read, sometimes aloud by candlelight. Some were old, retold from the medieval past. Others were new, blending legend and invention. There were tales of courtly love, of enchanted forests, of loyal squires and brave heroines. There were also fables, short moral tales featuring animals, tricksters, or clever peasants. These were easy to remember and often told aloud as well as read, and for those with a taste for the strange, there were books of wonders, describing odd beasts, distant lands, or mysterious sea creatures, some true, some wildly imagined. And what of love? Yes, love poems too. Sonnets were in fashion. Poets like Petrarch and Ronsard wrote verses to imagine beloveds, distant, perfect, unattainable. These were sometimes copied by hand into little books, bound in soft leather, kept in drawers, or carried close. Some read these poems aloud to woo. Others read them in silence, beneath apple trees, or beside slow rivers, dreaming of a love not yet found. And then there were letters, letters of courtship, of family news, of trade and travel. Many people copied model letters from books, especially if they weren't confident writers. These model letters filled small books, quietly teaching people how to say what they felt. In port cities and along rivers, books passed hands in stalls and ships. Travelers carried small volumes, poems, psalms, or even jokes to read on the road. Books began to be printed in smaller formats too, easier to carry. And sometimes people didn't read alone. They gathered in inns, by firesides, in guild halls. Someone would read aloud, a sermon, a story, a bit of news, and the room would quiet and listen. It wasn't fast or urgent or loud. It was slow, shared, peaceful, like tonight. So, what did people read in the 1500s? They read to learn, to pray, to laugh, to dream. They read slowly, often aloud. They turned pages with care. Books were not just paper. They were portals, companions, invitations. And now, as your eyelids grow heavy, perhaps you feel what they felt. The quiet delight of words at night, the soft whisper of stories long past. Let yourself drift now, like a page turning in the breeze, like a candle burning low, like an old book gently closing. Good night. Sleep well.